Come join me in my creative space where we can paint, learn, and have a few laughs. So get comfy and let's get started. I'm Kat, and today's project is a solar eclipse of the heart. I'm using some masking fluid by Dr. P.H. Martin, and I've provided a little sketch at the end of the video should you need one. I'm going to be wetting this entire background with the exception of a tiny area which will be where the eclipse is taking place. And I didn't plan this out very much. I just knew what colors I wanted to use in the drawing, and then I just went from there. So you'll learn as I learn. And if you do like this video, folks, please consider giving me a like. It really helps the channel to grow so that other people can see the video and I can keep making them. Here's the colors that I chose to use with their pigment numbers for your information. And I'm using a brush that is way too small here, I know, but it's because I want to use it for around the moon, the eclipse. So I'm just dabbing in some of this dioxazine violet just to see how it moves in the water, if my paper's wet enough, and it is. So I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to go into this. Now, with a solar eclipse, the moon, it places itself over the sun, right? Between the sun and the earth. So I want the outside to look like the sun is still glowing, but with the moon in front of it. So it was a little bit tricky to plan out. And of course, purple and yellow are complementary colors, and they make a beautiful brown. So you have to be careful when you're working with these two colors that things don't turn to mud. Now this is PV19. It's quinacridone rose, and I'm just dropping that into the sky because while this is kind of a dark sky because of the moon, I still want it to look like the sun's in it. So I was playing with a lot of pinks and yellows, and I think I even may add a touch of orange, but I can't really remember doing it. So, and this will be water in the end, what I'm painting right now. So it's just a very light coat because dioxazine violet is extremely strong color. So don't go in heavy-handed. I often do this and I regret it. I have to scrap my paper because it's too dark. It's almost darker than black if you can imagine. So wherever your color bleeds, if you don't want it, you take a cloth. I have a tissue there, and I just dab it up as soon as possible because a lot of colors are staining, like yellow is staining, and so is the dioxazine. So I got lucky there. See, I did go in with a dab of orange, and I added some PV19 to it, the Quin Rose, and it's because I want it to look warm too from the sun behind the moon there. And I just thought this would be a nice card for Valentine's, for my Valentine. And you can adjust the drawing to look like the Valentine that you want to give your card to. So my Valentine has a beard, and he wears a hat often, so I thought that would be nice. And so yeah, so just use the form that I give you if you need it, and then just alter it a little bit. So I'm just spreading things out so that they don't look so kind of clumpy. Sometimes when you charge in paint, it does kind of sit there. Some paint disperses better than others. So after this is completely dry, you can't work on it when it's not. I am wetting where I want the moon to be. So if you look at a photo of a moon, you can see all the craters from a distance, and that's what I'm going to be painting next. So I decide to use the quinacridone rose and a bit of purple for the darker spots, and I just play with that family of like pink, purple, you know, the lights and the medium values and then darker values. And I am looking at a photo just to see where I can place these and try not to overdo it, these little specks. And I'm trying to make sure that they're soft. Now I've decided to add some bright rose into the picture. So I go over the same areas. It's just to add another, it's just to add some variation to the pinks and the purples that I was using. And as I said, I did not plan this out too well, so I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out. I ended up liking it, but the moon was a little bit challenging because I think when you're painting, sometimes that's the challenge, is that if you had planned it ahead of time, you would know what you're going to do. But I was really on the fence about the color scheme, and I didn't know if I wanted to do blue, and I chose the purples, and in the end I was happy, but as I said, it was a bit tricky. So I'm keeping everything soft. That's what I'm doing there with my, this is one of my favorite brushes. It's an Aqua Elite by Princeton, size 6. I love this brush. I don't know why I love it so much. It holds the perfect amount of water and it has a wonderful point on it. So now I'm establishing the horizon, which you'll see is not very straight. So while your painting's dry, you can always just draw out a very light pencil line, because horizon lines usually are quite straight. So, you know, you may want to do that. I didn't do that, so I fix it up later. And I'm just doing some trees on this side. And they're going to, because the paint is because I wet the paper behind it, they're going to lightly get a little light and fuzzy looking, but not completely disperse into the background. I still want you to know that there are trees there. And if you do this, you take the point of your brush and you just sort of zigzag back and forth with your hand moving up and down all the while. I hope you noticed my new intro. I finally got brave and showed my face. I'm a little bit shy. And to be quite honest, if I had to wait to look appropriate to be on camera every time I filmed, I would never paint and I would never film. So I hope you enjoyed that. And there's some little buildings. As I said, this part was not from a photo. It's just from my head. So the buildings, keep in mind that the moon is in the center. So you put the darker part of the buildings on the right side. And on the left side, the trees, with the darker part of the trees, would be to the left. And I decided to do some giant regular kind of trees here. They're not very, you know, they're nondescript, but you could tell that they're trees of some kind. And some more buildings, and just for some interest. Does anybody know that song Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler from 1983? I'm aging myself. Oh God. So I thought, that's why I thought of this. It's a solar eclipse from the heart. I'm kind of goofy sometimes. The older I get, the goofier I get. So now I'm adding a darker value, same color, just going in with with another layer of paint so it shows up darker, just so it looks like there are layers of trees back there. And now I'm going very, very light and watery pigment. I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to, you can't even really tell what it is, if it's trees, if it's, you know, some trees on a hill, if there might be a couple of buildings back there. It's very nondescript. Just put it in there so that there's something there. And on top of these, I add a teeny tiny bit of like a yellowy peachy color, because they are also getting light on them from the Eclipse. Yeah, right there. Just at the very tips of them. It's getting a glow from the sun that's behind the moon, and I should have put sunglasses on these little characters, because you should never look up at this. I know, but they're looking at each other, so they didn't need the sunglasses. And here is a bridge that I'm attempting to paint. A very, 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 very simple bridge, no detail, but you can tell it's one all the same. And a bit of the light on the water, or this could be ice, whatever you choose. You could make it snow. I just chose water. In Montreal, we have bridges over our expansive river, so I just thought it would be nice to add a bridge. And this is just a tiny bit of marine blue that I'm adding in for color variation and slight little waves, kind of like ripples in the water. And I love that color. So even if it doesn't go, I just love it. So I had to use it. And now these are just shadows in the water. And again, dry this, because if you go over something that is not completely dry, you are going to lift the paint that's underneath it. And worse than that, you could end up with a big blotch, like a cauliflower, they call it, or a bloom. Sometimes you want those, but in this case, you don't. I'm just darkening the bridge, so it would be darker underneath than it would be on top. And there's very little detail on this, so I just chose the lighter mauve to go on the top of the bridge. Now I'm adding a bit of purple. Again, just one more layer like I did on the other side with the trees. And I'm not being very fussy. I'm just adding another layer of trees, just so they look like they're closer to us and we can see them better. That's what the best part of having this pointy brush is. It could do such tiny little detail work, or it can do loose stuff. I love it. Now I'm going to wet the heart, the top part, because I want the sky to be darker. Now this can be a little tricky and a little scary, because as I said before, you want a nice even sort of wash, but dioxazine violet can be overpowering, so you really have to be careful. So I wet everything and I go in with it. This is my size 8 silver black velvet, and this is precisely what I want. The paint is pretty creamy and the brush is not dripping wet, but it's wet, and it starts to creep its way downward. So I lift the paper up, and it's very, very near here that I get interrupted, and it cannot be helped. So when I come back to it, I'm kind of in a panic because every little second counts when you're doing this. So if you can, plan to do this when no one's going to bother you. Because I didn't want to lose all those beautiful colors in the sky. So I have a tissue nearby and it'll come in handy. So here I sprayed it with some water and I take a brush because I'm trying to save it now, because what happened when I got interrupted, that darker purple started to dry and I wasn't holding the paper upward. So I decide to spray it with water and I'm holding the paper vertically so that the paint will just creep its way down the page. It spreads and I'm drying up right above the tree line. You'll see here, I dab at it very gently with the tissue and then I get see, I'm drying my damp brush off just to tickle those edges so that they're smooth looking. I don't want to cover anything up, but I also don't want that harsh edge. And it ends up working out just fine. So once it's dry, you remove the masking fluid, and I used a combination of the marine blue and the dioxazine violet to make this beautiful blue, and it works out perfectly for the first layer of to paint on these characters. So it'll be easy to go over with another layer and add some darks to this color. When the beautiful thing that happens when you mix two colors together, often they'll separate, and this is exactly what happens, especially on the male, because I didn't mix up enough for the female, so I had to mix a separate well of color for her, and his is a slight bit waterier, and so you can see the separation, and I love that. It's really especially nice if you're doing something atmospheric, like if you're doing something in the sky, and you use these two colors. They just separate all on their own. See, maybe I should have used that in the sky. I really was debating blue, purple, blue, purple. And I'm leaving a slight white edge along his nose and one of his lips and the hat. And that's just so you're aware of where the light is coming from. How often do you get to paint? I'm curious. I know some people are busier than others and it's hard to set aside time. Now you see I mixed a different color, excuse me, it's the same colors, just it's a little thicker. So I keep putting my brush back into the water, trying to thin it out a little so I can spread it better. But it's okay to me that they're different colors. I didn't really mind that. It's hard to paint sometimes, to find time to paint, not only because you're busy, but if you don't have a special space to do it. Especially with watercolor, you have to let things dry, and which means you have to leave it out. So I'm curious to know how you guys go about finding time, making time to paint. I was very fortunate that when my children left home, I was able to get a room specifically for my crafting, because I like to sew and crochet as well. So I'm very fortunate I have a room strictly for that, for being creative. Now I'm adding a little bit of pink and yellow to the sky, trying not to overdo it. And this is the bleed proof white. You can use any white that you have. And I'm going to go around the moon so that there's a ridge, so that you can see that the moon is one thing and the sun is another. Although I'm not sure if, like, right away, my husband knew what it was when I showed it to him. So now he knows what his card looks like. I guess it's better than not getting a card at all. So after I do this, I proceed to take a bit more white, and I speed this up a little bit, just by a tad, by a half a point, just so, because it's a little, little drawn out. But I'm just adding a few ripples in the water. I'm just tickling the very tip of my brush over the paper. So if you're doing this as well, you could do this before you take off the masking fluid. Now I am adding some purple in right underneath where I put those white ripples, the glistening ones. I put some darks. And I'm not fussing any more than that with the water. I think you can see that it's water and that it's fine. I don't want the water to be the focal point. And the more detail you add to something, it becomes the focal point. So if you have too many focal points, people don't know what to look at. So now I'm doing the second layer of the characters. So I do not go right to the very edge. I try not to. And I try to leave a few things pale. And it does look funny at first when the paint is still wet, but once it's dry, you'll see that the person has a bit of shape to them. Even though it's dark, you can see a little bit. And I leave things paler where I think the light might be hitting a little bit, so that you could see that he has a collar and his jacket or sweater, whatever it is, his shoulders hit, the light just hits his shoulders a little bit, and his eye is recessed because it's the deepest part of our face, so that is darker, and it ends up working out when it dries. It does look funny though. Watercolor, that's the trick with watercolor, is you have to practice to know not to panic. Because had I done this a few years ago, I would have said, oh no, I have to throw this out. I've ruined it. But once it dries, it really dries quite nicely and you end up liking it. So never throw something away until you've left it alone for a while, and come back to it. Sometimes you look at it with new eyes. You just need a different frame of mind, or you need the paint to dry. It's as simple as that. And I'm doing the same thing with her hat, except there's a part there that the paint, while I'm looking at it from here, it looks really dark. So I start to lift right there. I wet my brush. I don't dry it completely, but it's still quite wet, and I'm trying to lift off some of that color and put a little bit of water there at the same time. But as I said, these colors are extremely staining, so they're hard to remove. And I just soften these edges up with a damp brush. I don't want anything hard, but I don't want to cover everything completely either. I want their faces to have a little bit of definition. And if you're more comfortable just using one solid color, you don't have to have any definition either. It could just be a pure silhouette. So you do what you're comfortable with, and then go and make a card. I really want to know if you've tried it. I started a Facebook page. It's very new. I would like you to post your work there if you can. Look for Kat's Creations. It's a group. The link is down below. And now I'm struggling to get the masking off, but it comes off very easily. It was just me struggling. And I'm putting some white highlights. I felt I lost a little bit on his cap and hat and her nose, I think. And just anywhere you feel like you lost a little bit of the light. And then I set it up to spray some stars. This is not snow, this is stars. So I put white paint on a toothbrush, and you can use your finger to flick it, but I didn't want to do that. So you just put it on the edges, and I used like a large baking, I can't remember what, it's like a toothpick, but it's not. It's like a skewer, excuse me. And so that looks like a starry sky. And if you get it in places you don't want it, you could just paint over it with a light coat of the same color. And then I'm going to start cutting it out, and I'll show you what that looks like so that you'll know what you have left once you cut it out. So it's okay if you go over the lines like I did, because you're going to cut it out anyway. And I glue it to some cardstock. I do that offline. I didn't do that part online. And voila, you have a card. So it's a pretty simple project, and I think it turned out quite nice, actually. So if you do it, I would love to see it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving me a like and subscribing to my channel, and hit that notification button so you'll get notified of all my new videos. And don't be shy to leave a comment. I always love to hear from you. Take care and happy watercoloring. Bye-bye.